Isn't that a lovely image? I wish I could say I painted it, but no. It's just the supplies I used for this session. This time it's just practicing with some simple brush strokes and patterns. And all I used was paper, paints, and 2 brushes. And I'll talk more about those items as we go along. I wasn't feeling particularly inspired that day. I knew I wanted to play with the Graphitint paints because I really like them, and also because I hadn't used them a whole lot yet. But I didn't know how or what to paint. So I figured practicing an exercise in strokes and creating background patterns might be good. I've shown these paints before. I believe it's called the Graphitint Paint Pan Pocket Set. At least that's what it says on the included swatch sheet. The colors are soft and muted. Not so, they're hard cakes, but appearance-wise, they're soft and muted with a graphite sheen. For the first pattern, I went with steel blue, dark indigo, and aubergine. Yeah, sometimes the pre-printed swatches aren't that great at showing the true colors, and I've heard a couple of people say they didn't care for this one either, but I'm very happy with it. In my opinion, the colors are well represented on that sheet, and although I've swatched them myself, I just keep the pre-printed sheet inside the box for reference. It works great for me. You can see more Graphitint paint action in a couple of previous videos that I will link to in the description, including the initial unboxing and swatching, and a small painting of a seahorse. This next pattern is with the colors Autumn Brown, Russet, and Meadow. Now, the brushes are a Princeton Aqua Elite 1/4 inch stroke and an Escoda Versatile No. 8 round. They're both synthetic and they simulate Kolinsky sable. I'm a fan of several Princeton brush lines, mainly Aqua Elite, Neptune, and Snap. But the Escoda brush is special to me. It's the only one I have from that maker, and that's thanks to a lovely viewer who sent it to me. Escoda has been making quality brushes in Spain for they started in 1933, so nearly 90 years. It's not only an excellent brush, it's beautiful to look at too. If I ever want to impress someone in the studio, I'll pull out the Escoda for sure, because goodness knows, the pile of dirty mugs isn't going to do it. Plus, check it out. You can't really see it there. We've moved on now, and that's the other brush. But the ferrule is triple crimped. I haven't seen that on any of my other brushes. This is the Aqua Elite again. Speaking of beautiful brushes, I don't recall ever seeing a better looking barcode on a brush handle. I kid. It always bugs me when that side of the brush is front and center in the footage. but I never think about trying to get the good side of the brush while I'm in the moment. The Escoda brush doesn't have a barcode. Just saying. No, I get it. It's about practicality, so they don't have to slap a sticker on it. It makes sense. It's just not pretty. The colors for the previous pattern were juniper, port, and graphite gray. The paper there was Fluid 100 cold pressed watercolor paper. That's the 8x8 size block. It's the 100% cotton stuff. Having used Fluid 100 paper a few times now, I find it useful to have around. The cold pressed is mildly textured, and the hot pressed is pleasant to work with. This isn't necessarily my go-to for important pieces. I usually prefer Hanamola Collection or Arches Cold Pressed for those, but I'm happy to use it for most other instances, along with Fabriano Artistico, especially when I don't want the toothiness of some other brands. The other hot press paper I have is from Arches, and I think I prefer Fluid 100's hot pressed over Arches hot pressed. Can't pinpoint why. I'm mostly going by how often I use them. I've used Fluid 100 hot pressed for 4 projects, I think, and Arches hot pressed only twice, maybe. Honestly, the paper I'm most into these days is the Hanamola Collection cold pressed. I really like that stuff. But it's so nice having a selection of good papers. The first couple of videos I did, I had dug up an old pad of Langton cold pressed that a friend had given to me, like more than 20 years ago, and the results were surprising, and not in a good way. Actually, someone recently suggested storing my watercolor paper in airtight containers or bins, and that sounds like a good idea to me. It would involve an investment. I'd have to get a container large enough for my 11 by 15 pad. That's the biggest I have. I mean, is that something people worry about? I think I'd go through what I currently have as far as paper supply before any problems arise, such as deterioration of the sizing. So maybe I'm worrying needlessly. Then again, I don't want a repeat of, "Ooh, why is my painting all splotchy?" So better to be safe than sorry, right? I don't know what you'd call this, rope, maybe? Or hair braids. The Great Slug Migration? Once again, that's the color autumn brown. This makes me think of cable knit sweaters. Probably not the exact pattern, but that's what it makes me think of. Sometimes called fishermen's sweaters. I believe that's the color russet once again. I'll admit I sometimes fantasize that I'm motoring along on a trawler boat, dropping crab traps, puffing on a corncob pipe, and showing off my anchor tattoos. Wait, that wasn't me. That was Popeye the Sailor Man. I was 12 years old when I saw the movie Popeye at the cinema in 1980. But I was already familiar with the old cartoons, thanks to after-school television programming. I think it's considered a failure as a film, but Paramount Pictures actually made a respectable profit from it. It's notable for being Robin Williams' first movie role and for having original songs by Harry Nilsson. But as a kid, I was just tickled that Ray Walston, who played an alien in the TV series My Favorite Martian, was playing Popeye's dad. Because Robin Williams had a TV series playing an alien in Mork and Mindy. Coincidence? Or the universe forming a harmonious cosmic circle? You decide. Here I was just filling up the rest of the page with fluffy cloud-like shapes in random Graphitint paint colors, like little tufts of cotton candy. I want to call that granulation, but you could probably call it sedimentation, or simply grit. And when it comes to the stuff on the bottom of the coffee carafe, dregs or sludge. So many words for something nobody wants to drink. This session was a good idea, and I'm happy to share it with you. No, I wasn't up for anything too complicated, but when that happens, maybe do some practice stuff, like strokes and patterns. And now I'm wondering, how long of a life do paintbrushes generally have? I mean, I've only been painting for 4 or 5 years, but I expect a good brush should last at least that long, no? Not that I've had these 2 brushes that long. I've only had them for about a year. But like my underwear, I'll still be using these things when they're frayed and misshapen with scant fibers left. Wait, I take that back. I have higher standards for art supplies than I do for underwear. I'm not saying I'd trash a brush at the first bent hair. After all, I'd done repair work on my first crappy brushes. Don't recall the brand. The sort that came as a dozen in a package, where the ferrules randomly popped off. A lot like my underwear, actually. I'm okay with that, because if I'm going to be picky about anything, it should be art supplies. The things associated with beauty, not things associated with, well, you can finish that sentence. Until next time, stay artsy, my friends.